And thank you everyone for taking some time out with us today. I'm delighted to have some partners here from Verizon to get us started on a conversation around career competencies that NACE has been using in connecting with employers and higher education institutions for many years. I think we started in about 2015. And to talk a little bit about a new assessment tool that connects to those competencies and how we might consider using that for employers. So we're going to just start by a little round of introductions, and I'll pass it over to Liz to get started.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nisha, and thanks so much for having us here. We are really excited to be talking with you all today. My name is Liz Longmuck. I'm Associate Director of University Relations at Verizon. Our team in University Relations is tasked with building connections between universities and the business in the service of helping students to experience our culture, see what Verizon has to offer, ultimately to take on an internship, a co-op, or an early career full-time role with us. I am currently closing in on my first 8 months at Verizon. Before that, I was VP of Partnerships and Learning at an experiential learning company out of Philadelphia. And prior to that, and this is part of what makes me really excited to be talking about this with you all today, I had spent the previous 12 years on the university level, both as a faculty member and as an associate professor out of the provost's office as the head of dual credit programming. So Trisha, let me pass it on over to you.
Thank you, Liz. Hello, everyone. I'm Trisha McKenzie, Senior Program Manager at Verizon for the Act Fellows Program. I've been with Verizon for about 2 years, helping to equip early talent to be ready for the marketplace. And before my time here, I was with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey in their Supplier Diversity Division, helping small businesses to be prepared to compete for and win contracts. I'm happy to be here today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Urek-Soy. I am a Senior Manager of Selection and Assessment Strategy at Verizon. One of the populations that I work most closely with is our internship population and our early career talent hires at Verizon. So it's a population that is near and dear to my heart. I've been with Verizon also for about 2 years. And before that, I worked as a consultant, helping other organizations implement and get benefit from assessments in selection and development. And before that, I worked in a test development shop where we helped create and standardize assessments for educational and school psychology contexts. So I come with a broad and diverse understanding of assessments and their application, and it's something that I'm really excited to talk about today with everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here and for bringing your various expertise to the conversation. I'm going to start with a little bit of an overview of just who NACE is, why we care about competency development, and why we've kind of honed in on that specific sort of tool set and framework, and then a little bit about the development of this particular assessment tool. I hope to do that pretty quickly so we can launch into a conversation with you all. So let me just share my screen quickly and get us started. All right, so NACE, just so you have a sense of the scope of kind of where we gain our information and really the scope of influence we bring to the table. We represent about 17,000 members nationwide, 2,800 institutions and organizations, 10,700 college career services professionals, right? So that was kind of like where we grew out of, is our career services professionals, and then 3,600 early talent recruitment specialists. So that's kind of the range of folks that we are connected to at all times and where we get our information. We're really excited about the conversation today because we continue to want to grow and understand how to connect our college talent into careers. The idea for the NACE competencies comes out of broad research that shows that our colleges think we're preparing students beautifully for the world of work, and our businesses don't necessarily agree that there are lots of core areas of development that we need to focus on more directly so that we can really prepare students for the world of work. That tends to be those kind of durable skills. Some people call them soft skills, core skills, right? That are the NACE career competencies. right? This becomes a framework where we can really pull higher education professionals together to help students develop these skills and use some evidence-based research to really drive a better access and equity in the labor market, share promising practices, et cetera. And just to give you a sense of how many folks are using career competencies in our higher education partners, about 75% of them are using them in some way. You can see about 43% of them have them in some sort of department-wide use, which can mean like a department, like a major. It can also mean a certain area of practice, like in student engagement, for example, or student leadership or something like that. About 30% are using them really institution-wide, which is what we're driving toward, is having a career plan and career focus that happens across the institution and therefore across the academic experience for students. A lot of folks have asked us over years, before I was here, to develop an assessment tool for the NACE competencies, and that's why we're here today. That project started a couple of years ago, looking across the kind of the field of practice to look for other kinds of rubric development, assessment development for some models, and then started to build the actual assessment tool that we have created today. And it's gone through about 3 different major phases of testing and kind of adjustment over the last nearly 2 years. We've had 100 schools participate, about 600 volunteers, including students, and have now confirmed that the tool is valid, usable, and reliable. This is a snapshot of one of the really sort of sub-rubrics, or it's like a series of rubrics for each competency. You'll see a page like this in the assessment tool. And you can see across the top, we have a sort of mastery-based lexicon, right? We start with emerging knowledge and move over to advanced application, and that there are 3 dimensions coming down the side. Those dimensions, and really all the language that sits here, comes out of research on real behaviors that are expected around each competency by our employer partners. You'll also see on the top, it says observer version. I think I'll mention this a little bit later too, but there are 2 versions of this. One is really for self-assessment from a student, or it can be an intern. And then the other is an observer version, right? So somebody sort of looking at someone else's behavior and validating that way. Oh, this is where I say that. So yeah, so you just have both of those options, right? And I think that's something that we'll talk about a little bit today as we go through our conversation. I wanted to mention quickly that there is kind of more places to learn about this work, and actually from practitioners in the field, both employers and in higher education, and across employment and higher education, at our NACE Competency Symposium coming up November 14th. If you want to dig into some real examples, that's a good place to do so. And that's it, and I will jump out here and make sure we can then begin our conversation. So yeah, I really am excited to get started to talk with you all and to hear a little bit more directly from your experience in the field. Let's start with you, Heather. I'd love to start by asking if you can say a little bit about how assessments are used, particularly in the area of early career hires. And if you could share your thoughts about, what this type of assessment might be used for, or how it can be useful for employers.
Sure, thank you. I think that's a good place to start. I think that over the past, let's say, 20 years or so, assessments in the workplace have hopefully transformed from being something that is a little bit anxiety-ridden, a little bit scary, feels very evaluative, right, to something that is more looked upon as a positive thing. It's a data collection tool. It's another way for us to tap in and learn about our population of interest, where regular conversations and interviews and observations, right, aren't enough. So I think it's a great tool to add into your toolkit, especially with early career talent, Certainly individuals that are just coming out of the university experience or other academic scenarios are used to taking assessments, used to getting feedback. So this feels very natural to them. The assessment itself, I think there's some really, really cool features in it that I want to talk about. But I thought we could start just by talking about the competency model itself and why that matters, because the assessment brings that to life. So I want to talk about why the competency model really is the underpinning of the great work here. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, organizations will establish competency models to create a consistent framework, to have a shared language, and to have a universal understanding of what matters to the organization, right? It's how they establish their North Star, where they're going to anchor their organizational culture. And it's a good way to communicate your commitment to success as an organization, but not just to success, about how you're going to get there, right? How you want to carry yourself as an organization to achieve your goals. The NACE career readiness competencies specifically, I think, signal a really nice investment by organizations to its employees that they value the core critical skills that are going to help them succeed no matter what role they're in currently, what role they want to advance to, whether it's in the organization, out of the organization, right? I think I heard you say in the beginning, we used to call these career readiness skills soft skills because there was this dichotomy, right, between those and, say, actual hard skills like coding or welding, right? Similarly, right, we used to talk about the sciences in the same way. Physics and chemistry were the hard sciences, and psychology was a soft science, right? And the theory is that there was less rigor, less importance with these soft skills, soft sciences, right? I'm happy to say we have moved from that language, right? We are not talking about psychology as a soft science, and we're not really talking about these skills as soft skills anymore. Now you'll hear people refer to them as core skills, transferable skills. Trish is going to talk about them as power skills, right? And I think that the change in the language about how we're talking about them really underscores our understanding of their foundational importance, right? So understanding these things, assessing these things, having a good read on your talent for these types of things is really just really important. It's especially important when we talk about early career talent, I think, because these are individuals, let's say they're interns, they're co-ops, they're just fresh out of college. This is their first job type of employees, right? This is a special population that we want to care for. They have limited exposure to a variety of work environments, a variety of work personalities, a variety of reporting structures, right? All this stuff is new. And it's a great example of what got you here won't get you there, right? What got you good marks in school may not translate to what will get you good marks on your performance review. This is also super relevant when we talk about organizations who want to move towards more of a skills-based hiring model, which is something else that you're hearing a lot of people talk about these days, right? And underneath this is the idea that we want to prioritize skill requirements for the job over degree requirements where it's appropriate. So when you do that, and you expand and diversify your candidate population, which is the goal, right, of skills-based hiring approaches, you're also expanding and diversifying the level of career readiness that these folks may come into the organization with. So individuals that are coming from apprenticeship programs or vocational training, they might have different skill needs and gaps related to career readiness that this competency model can really kind of like fill in. I will say, beyond just having it in place, when you have these competencies embedded into your performance expectations, you can make feedback conversations a lot more constructive, and they're aligned with the organizational goals, right? And this is really important because managers, mentors can use the competency model to structure their feedback, create specific and tailored growth plans, identify specific goals that reflects both the individual and how they view themselves, as well as where the organization wants to go, right? When you have competencies that are embedded into regular reviews and feedback sessions, you give employees clear, actionable insights into where they excel and where they can improve. And this is what you want to do, right? And I know this not just from an academic sense, but I have my own lived experience with this, right? So I will say early in my career, while I was still in grad school, I got my very first ever big girl office job, right? And after about a year there, I felt like I had, had my feet under me. I had a good mastery of the content. Things were good, but I got passed over for a promotional opportunity. And so I went to my manager and I talked to them, what's the deal here? Why did you choose this other person instead of me? And the feedback that they gave me was just really disappointing. It was really ambiguous. It was, gosh, we just don't see what we need to see from you yet. You just don't have it yet. Keep looking for opportunities to show us what you can do. That was their feedback to me. And so I left that conversation feeling really frustrated and kind of bummed, right? Because I didn't know what else I should be doing. I didn't have anything that I could put down and say, this is the goal I'm going to work towards this year. Let's talk about how I did. It was just, I don't know, try to be better somehow, but we can't really articulate it, right? Now I have a sense that at 26, probably the thing I was lacking was one of these career readiness skills, right? But we didn't have that language, that shared understanding where we could talk about my performance in those terms. So that's why I think this competency model is really important, right? Really critical and can really drive value in the way that you're trying to grow and develop your employees. So that brings us to the assessment, right? The assessment is the thing that turns the competency model from a noun into a verb, okay? The assessment, from what I have seen, really, it's designed to be very easy to use, very approachable. It's written in a language that feels accessible to people, right? And it's quick and easy to complete, because doing this assessment with your employees, with your early career talent, shouldn't be the event, right? The development activity. It should be the catalyst for a long-term program of development events that you can use the assessment to help structure and guide. So here's a couple of things about the assessment I think that I want to highlight, that I want everyone to know some of the parts that I really see as being value add for the organization, like what makes it really cool, basically. So one thing is, Nisha, you were talking about how there's a self-report version and an other report version, right? So this is good because we're all used to the self-assessment, right? What are my skills? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? This is a good individual lens of how you perceive yourself. But we know that everyone is not always hyper self-aware, grounded in reality about where all of their opportunities lie, right? And so it's really valuable to have someone else come in and say, okay, this is what I see you do. This is what you see you do. Let's talk about where we're aligned and where we see gaps, right? This is really good feedback, especially for early career talent. And having multiple sources of feedback will give you a really rich, qualitative, robust sense, right? And a good foundation for the conversation. Doing traditional 360s with interns and co-ops can be really challenging, right? Because maybe they don't work with a huge population of people who can give feedback. Maybe they have a limited role assignments, right? There's limited opportunities to observe them. So being able to distill down this kind of multi-view feedback into just the intern and their mentor, or the intern and their manager, for example, can kind of give you that same quality of data without having to launch this enormous, potentially, complicated 360 program. So that's one of the things where I think there's a lot of value. The other thing that I really like is its concreteness. So it is very much meeting students, interns, early career talent where they are, okay? I see this through the way that the response scale is set up. So when you're observing students or interns' behavior, you're not agreeing or disagreeing to statements about what they do. You're kind of leveling where they are. Do they have knowledge? Do they have understanding, or are they applying it, right? This is a lot more valuable of kind of like chunks of information than just agree or disagree, right? It's actionable. I know that career development activities will benefit me. I understand how doing these career activities actually translates into opportunities. And I'm doing these career development activities, right? Those are 3 totally separate phases that your employees can be in. And each one naturally will drive, right, a development activity. So you have this assessment, you can identify where they want to work, and then you can go back to the competency model, which has all of these validated behaviors, and picks them out and say, great, if we want to work on career and self-development, that was an area that either we both rated you as knowing or understanding but not applying, or just want to increase your level of application. Let's look at some of these behaviors and pick 1 or 2 to work on together, right? Maybe we say, okay, this year we're going to help you establish a new relationship with someone in the organization who can help you professionally. That's one of the behaviors from the competency, right? And that's a really actionable thing to build into someone's development plan. So I have said a lot. Obviously, I feel very passionately about interns, especially, right? Providing them with something other than a paycheck. At Verizon, we take that very seriously, right? We want to give interns work experience, life experience, growth opportunities, mentorship, networking opportunities. And I think something like this that cross-cuts roles and levels, right? Something that is just there to prepare you to be a more successful professional, regardless of where you end up, only benefits everybody involved, basically.
Thanks so much, Heather. I have to say, I come out of many, many years in higher education. I've just sort of like crossed over into this zone where I'm really hearing from employers more. And to hear you describe how important that growth process is for interns is really, really heartening. And also just to think about the nuance that's in the tool that can be very helpful for learning. That really, resonated with me in really trying to understand what are the benefits, right? We really specifically went with a mastery kind of approach, specifically because we didn't want someone who was at that early stage to feel there was something particularly lacking. It's just that they're an earlier phase in the learning. And I like that you kind of pointed to that, right? You could attack, that one little area and really look for that next step without, overwhelming, somebody who was in the early learning period. Super helpful context. I really appreciate it. I'm going to move over to Tricia now and just hear a little bit from you. I'd love to hear your perspective on how you would currently leverage this assessment tool or something like it in supporting the program you work in at Verizon.
Sure. I'll be sharing with you how we leverage these competencies in practice. So I'm excited to share our vision for the Ad Fellows program and how it aims to cultivate holistic professionals who are not only technically proficient, but also equipped with the essential power skills, as we call it, needed to thrive in their careers. So before I do that, I would like to give you a little background about the program and what makes it unique. Then I'll go into the power skills that we train on, and I'll discuss our training approach and desired outcomes. Our program is called Ad Fellows. It is a unique fellowship designed to create an inclusive future in the marketing industry. The program provides fellows with a platform to launch their careers while offering partner and brand agencies access to highly skilled and talented individuals with fresh perspectives. So it's not only beneficial to the Ad Fellow, it's beneficial to many industry partners in having access to early talent. So the vision of the program is to fuel the industry with a diverse range of talent that would lead us to the future of marketing. Right? So what makes the program unique? The program is an industry fellowship offering new graduates and career changers a fully integrated immersion experience through brand and agency collaboration. Folks that join our program, they complete distinct rotations, approximately 10 weeks with partner companies, giving them the opportunity to learn and to gain experience in different roles and environments. They get real-world brand and agency exposure and access to a huge marketing network to launch their careers. They receive dedicated professional development support, including learning sessions and mentoring, and they have an opportunity for full-time employment with one of the partner organizations upon graduating the program. So our goal, while it's straightforward and ambitious, is that we want to create a comprehensive learning experience that empowers our fellows to excel in both technical and power skills. So let's break down what these skills look like. So for technical skills, they're the abilities, the knowledge, the expertise required to perform specific job-related tasks. So think of these as the foundational building blocks for any professional role. For our fellows, acquiring these skills will occur throughout their various rotations within the program. They'll engage in real-world tasks that directly relate to their field, allowing them to gain hands-on experience that's critical for their professional development. However, we recognize that in today's dynamic work environment, technical skills alone are not enough. This brings us to our focus on power skills. Power skills are the competencies that enable our fellows to navigate the complexities of the workplace effectively. So these skills aren't just nice to have, they're essential for success. And in our program, we emphasize 6 key power skills. The first is strategic thinking, the ability to see the big picture and align actions with long-term goals. Then we have problem solving, developing innovative solutions to overcome challenges. Communication, conveying ideas clearly, effectively to diverse audiences. Also, relationship management, building and maintaining positive professional relationships. There's collaboration, working well with others to achieve common outcomes, and productivity, where they're managing their time and resources efficiently to maximize output. So fellows will practice and refine these skills through real-world experience and targeted activities. Part of our program experience involves a 3-day learning lab that occurs between each 10-week rotation. And these labs are designed to be interactive and engaging, providing a supportive environment where fellows can experiment with and develop their power skills. Okay, so our training approach integrates both technical and power skills through a variety of channels. We utilize on-the-job training, and that's where fellows can apply what they learn in real time. Additionally, we conduct learning sprints via a WhatsApp channel, and this allows for quick, flexible learning opportunities that keeps everyone connected and engaged. So we would give them a challenge. Every Monday, there's a challenge to watch a video or learn something new and interact with one another. So they're actively practicing these power skills throughout the week. Additionally, we hold virtual check-in meetings. So these sessions are rich in discussion where we reflect on specific power skills. So this not only reinforces learning, but it also creates a space for sharing insights and experiences among fellows. And finally, our alumni panel discussions are invaluable. We have about 188 alumni, and we invite them throughout the year to come and speak on specific panels. They offer a platform for past participants to share their journeys and the impact of power skills in their careers, providing current fellows with relatable insights and inspiration. By blending these methodologies, we ensure that our fellows are not only equipped with technical expertise, but also with the power skills necessary to thrive in today's dynamic environment. But we don't stop there. Our program also embraces a collaborative approach to self-assessment and managerial feedback. So I talked about them having rotations earlier on. Each rotation ends with an assessment. So this is crucial for fostering an environment of open communication and mutual understanding. By encouraging Ad Fellows to reflect on their own experience and seek feedback, we empower them to take ownership over their development. So let's talk about desired outcomes. What we do hope to achieve through this holistic approach is that Ad Fellows are enhanced with employment readiness, improved interpersonal skills, and the ability to navigate complex challenges throughout their careers. We want them to leave this program not only as competent professionals, but as adaptable, confident individuals ready to tackle the demands of the modern workplace. In summary, we believe that by equipping our fellows with a balanced blend of technical skills and power skills, we're preparing them for success in their careers. This comprehensive training will help them thrive in an ever-evolving job market, enabling them to contribute meaningfully to their organizations and communities. We look forward to seeing the impact of our program. We're connected with many of our fellows on LinkedIn, and we've been fortunate enough to see their career growth. Those that started as associates that are now leading and directors. So we're happy to see our hard work come to life in the growth and longevity of the careers of our fellows.
It sounds like such an amazing program, Tricia. I mean, I was just taking copious notes because I just want to follow up and learn more and more and more about it. And to think so much about what you're saying is creating, you know, somebody who's really adaptable and confident. I think that's a lot of what I hear when we're with our higher education partners as well is, you know, how do you help students really understand those transferable skills? I love the term power skills that they're able to navigate, that give them that kind of confidence, like they understand how to function, even if things go a little different than they're expecting, they're able to kind of manage those things. It also made me think a little bit about what you hear a lot, those skills that are not, that are sort of AI proof, right? Those things that really help you be an individual and a real contributor, you know, in terms of innovation and creativity and confidence. So
Absolutely, it becomes part of your brand.
yeah. So I'm certainly going to try to learn more. And to me, trying to understand that balance that you've created between the so-called technical skills or the other kinds of skills, and then how they really blend with these power skills, I think that's a critical part of the conversation as well. Okay, I'm going to come over to Liz for a little bit of feedback from you. Can you tell us a little bit about how the assessment tool might come into play when you're building relationships with colleges or universities? I know that's something that Verizon is always working on, and that's something that sits right in your wheelhouse. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been thinking a lot about what it means to connect business with our higher ed partners. Before I talk about that a little bit more, I think Heather and Tricia, your comments really led me to think about what assessment is and what it means, how it's used, like what its intention is. So because I'm a word nerd, the thing that I didn't reveal before is that the thing that I was an associate professor of was English. I got all excited when we started talking about assessment because it allowed me to look up, it gave me an excuse to look up the etymology of the word assessment. And it actually means to sit beside. And I thought that that was really interesting and useful, right? Assessment can sound like a scary term. It certainly does not sound like a thing I'd like to do around the dinner table tonight. But, right, people, and because of that, people can be naturally resistant to it. But when we use it thoughtfully, right, it can be really powerful. It can be a way of connecting and engaging people like you're talking about with your challenges, with the Ad Fellows, Tricia, to really like sit beside people as they learn. You know, the more I think about it, the more I listen to my colleagues and to people in higher ed and in other businesses. I think a really important part of this is equity, right? You cannot assume that everyone has had access to the same education, to the same experiences. And so assessment of this is an opportunity to align goals, to identify areas for growth and development, and to really help people out on their way. And so I think that it's an exciting opportunity. The word just doesn't always sound warm and fuzzy. I guess the other thing that I was thinking about this morning, so I'm actually in our Basking Ridge office this morning, and we have an event with two of our partner schools. Right, so we have maybe 20 students in to spend time with us, to get immersed in our culture today. And we started the day with a panel discussion featuring 3 folks who work here in the business on the tech side. And the thing that really struck me and has struck me when I listen to people talk with students, this is pretty familiar to me at Verizon, but I'm sure that it's familiar to you all at a lot of the places that you work as well, is that the panelists naturally gravitated toward talking with students about what they called, and again, we'll use like a different term for it, what they called their soft skills. And so one of them said to the students, and I wrote this down because I was so excited about the timing of them saying this. She said, "You really need to push yourself on the soft skills. The technical skills will come and they will keep coming, but this is very important for you to be thinking about this actively." And we did not ask her to say this. We just knew, that it was something that would come up kind of naturally. And so this idea that soft skills or career competencies essentially are just as important as technical skills, I think is really striking for our conversation today and really speaks to how useful it is when 2 parties who are heavily involved in the ongoing education of young people, right? And that's everybody in this room today, the educational institutions and also companies where students might intern or take early career roles, when we start speaking the same language together. And so when I think of this tool, I think of it as an opportunity for us to agree on a language that we speak together, so we can be really clear together, and that there's a little less need for translation. In preparation for today's event, I had done a little bit of a deep dive on the history of assessment in higher education. And so what I found was really interesting. Heather is a deep well of knowledge regarding assessment on the employer front. Tricia is doing a really great implementation of training for those soft skills, the power skills on the program side for us. And when we think about how useful and important that kind of assessment is, and how great it would be to build those bridges between higher ed and businesses in which we're all speaking that same language to the benefit of student development, early career development, I think that it's easy to forget that assessment has a pretty complicated history on the academic side, that not everybody has always loved it. It continues to be a little controversial. That might be a bit of an understatement, right? And so I think that thinking about that and working our way through what that's looked on the higher ed side might be helpful as we think about how to implement it on the corporate side, because I think that there's a lot of shared lessons there for us. There is an excellent white paper on this on the website of the National Institute for Learning Outcome Assessment, and I don't want to spoil it for you. You should totally read it. It's only like 7 pages long, but it does a really nice job of detailing the long and complicated history of assessment in higher ed. But I do want to take us through part of it because I think it's really interesting. So the paper says that the formal history of programmatic educational assessment probably started around 1985. So really fewer than just 40 years ago, which I think, Heather, is super interesting when taken next to what you were talking about, how it started in earnest in the corporate space maybe 20 years ago. But even so, 20, 40, it's a relatively new idea. And the impetus for this idea was a response to the call in education, both internally and externally, for assessment for different reasons. Internally to education institutions, the idea was a very pure sounding one, right? The idea is about the improvement of teaching practices, right? We can improve what we are assessing, what we are measuring, and therefore, if we want to be really good teachers, then we should be assessing, what we are teaching students, what they are learning, all of those things. And then on the other hand, external to those institutions, there was a call for the educational institutions to be accountable to what they said they were doing, which is educating students, preparing them for their future life in all of its different manifestations. This is a call that I think we still see a lot of today. Both of these are still very relevant today. So in that, there's already a couple of controversial things going on there in terms of who thinks we should assess learning and why. But there was one more assumption that the paper kind of mentions, but that I remember really well from being a faculty member. And that was the assumption that all faculty in all disciplines would just naturally see the value of programmatic assessment and pretty easily figure it out and be really eager to do it all the time. And Nisha, I see you laughing because you know this feeling. Right, that was not exactly my experience as a faculty member. I remember faculty oftentimes being pretty resistant to the process for a lot of different reasons, right? And I think not all of them are totally unreasonable. But right, the list goes like things like, we have not always done things this way, or it feels like oversight of our syllabus in unpleasant ways, or it creates extra work, or the work can feel like busy work if you're not doing it right. The assessment process at its beginning was not always really easy to understand. I was there, I worked for 2 different higher ed institutions, and I was there as they began to implement these systems in real earnest, programmatically. And I remember the very first time that I wrote learning outcomes as a junior faculty member, I submitted them and someone sent them back to me and asked me to try again, which was a blow to my ego. I was teaching writing and I thought that I understood what was happening. And so I think it was hard for people to adapt to the system. So it took me a little while to figure out the verbs and how to start sentences with them. It took me a while to feel certain that I was hooking the outcomes to actual assignments and the units in my classes. And I think that we all know that if we don't feel like we have a grasp of how what we're doing hooks to the importance of what we're doing, it can feel disembodied, right? It can feel not particularly useful. And so again, I think that this is an interesting thing to think about as we implement this on the corporate side, right? What does it mean to be able to really teach people, to teach a set of professionals, right? Like the meaning of this and the good that it can do. I remember also that scoring on a rubric didn't always come naturally to a lot of faculty members because it was a real departure from just putting a grade on an essay based on your knowledge and experience. And so instead, what you had to do was you had to really go in and you had to show your work, which can be an extra level of work. But it can also mean that you are attempting to measure assignment outcomes more precisely. And like we talked about a second ago, right? Like what you measure, you can control better. I also think that a lot of people who I worked with when I was younger thought that assessment might go away. But by the early 90s, I think the figure that white paper notes was that about 98% of colleges were actively assessing their students and their courses in different types of ways, largely because of accrediting bodies, which we're calling for. And so by the time that I left higher ed, the schools that I was working with had really adapted it, had really moved toward it, and had decided that it was an important thing for us to do together. And now I think we're at an exciting place where we can see the technical skills, which are the things that I think that even in higher ed are what we set out to begin assessing and evaluating and making sure that we were teaching really well. The technical skills aren't the only thing worth measuring, and that this set of career competencies the NACE has been talking about and evolving for a really long time is also worth measuring. And so what excites me the most, I would say, about this type of measurement, which is a phrase that my 20-year-old self would have absolutely been appalled by, what excites me most about measurement, is that it has the potential to allow us to speak that common language, which means that we can really be true partners in training and developing our students together. And because I think we've all acknowledged a couple of times that we all have different names for these sorts of skills, right? The soft skills, the power skills, the career competencies. If we were to agree on a set of skills that we could measure together and what to call them and what they are and what their definitions are, then we could give students and our early talent, early career employees, we could give them feedback that would help them to grow, like Heather and Tricia were talking about. And I think that that's really where the best part of partnership is for us. When those 2 different types of institutions, businesses and higher ed, right, stop speaking different languages and agree on a language so that we are, right, essentially holding hands when we pass students between us and helping them to develop in similar ways.
Yeah, you brought up so many great points. Thanks, Liz. I hadn't really done that historical walk in a while. And I was the head of our assessment at Gutman Community College. So I have lived in that world where assessment really was my job, but I also was kind of like an assessment nerd. Like I kind of liked it. And I was also, privileged, I'll say, to be at an institution where the faculty were actually lead on assessment. So I wasn't like twisting arms, because in many places it is basically twisting arms to get folks to buy into that whole process. And that really makes me think about, and actually goes back to what you just pointed out. Heather, you brought up that in your early experience, you were given vague feedback and you didn't know what to do with it. Like that's what happens when there's not a common language, right? Is that you're like, huh? Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, it feels like black box. Like I can't get in there. Like, what's real about this situation? And I think if we're getting closer to being clear with students about the specific things they need to grow, and hopefully without the punitive piece, right? Because if we talk about it as mastery learning and through experience, like that students can gain these things, and this is how they gain these things, and it's not like mysterious. I think that we're gonna really grow in our connection. I also think I was thinking about, Tricia, how you have those power skills that you described are very much aligned with the NACE competencies. And I see this in higher education a lot as well, where maybe a college has a whole set of like core learning outcomes. This is often required by accrediting bodies, but institutional learning outcomes or general education learning outcomes, and they also align very well with the NACE competencies because they're kind of core ideas of learning in higher education. How to work across teams, how to learn to learn, like things like this. And I think that if we really start to hone in on those core skills and get a common sense of them, I do think the common language is important. But I also think as we are kicking off this bridge building, there's also availability of just aligning. You could still use these assessments in alignment with the current power skills that you've got, see where those connections occur or build, I just always think there has to be flexibility as we're starting to work together and we're starting to have a common language. And I think that like today you've got students coming in, you've got higher ed partners coming to your tables and trying to learn from you, is being open to having those conversations, sharing what you call things and hearing what they call things, and looking for those flexible alignments so that you can really start to build those bridges for students. Because I don't think all of a sudden we're going to snap our fingers and everybody uses the same language, but I think we're getting there. We're starting to have those conversations. It's part of why I showed up front that I think about 75% of higher education institutions recognize the NACE competencies and use them in some way, to get a sense that like this might be a place to start for industry to kind of think like, okay, what aligns with these things that is already part of our practice, and how do we start to have those really engaged conversations? Because I think the power skills, the durable skills, soft skills, whatever, however we can remember what they are, and the hard skills and the technical skills are all part of the conversation between industry and higher education, right? Like all of those things have to come into alignment. And the more we can have really direct conversations between these different sort of pieces of the puzzle in our economy, I think we're going to get more alignment and also a greater access and equity, because I think that at least my experience. So prior to working here, I worked at the New York Jobs CEO Council, which was working with about 30 of the large companies and in New York City, and trying to look at different inroads to internships and things like that. I think as we sit, there are flows happening of talent. And what we want to do is just make sure that we're kind of growing, expanding where that flow is coming, and that we have a lot of different kinds of players, a lot of really incredible talent that might not be those folks that are already aware of the experiences and the internships and what things they have to get into line to get into some of these great entry-level positions with real growth possibility and real, wealth development over time. So I think that's another piece of the puzzle. Yeah, I'm talking too much. I would love to hear any other thoughts you have. I think all of you mentioned such different perspectives on sort of competency focus and tools, and any other ideas come up as you were all sharing your perspective? Anything else that's kind of top of mind that you'd like to share?
I'll say, Trisha, when you were talking about some of the unanticipated benefits and value of your fellows, right, going through the program, I heard you say something about building and improving their brand, right? And I think that's such an important thing to talk about, right? Because this is almost like a calling card for your ability to go between organizations, go between environments, go between personalities, right? If you can master these career readiness competencies, that really becomes part of your personal brand and how you show up at work, which I think is very empowering and I think speaks and resonates to early career talent today. I also think on the flip side, adopting this approach to competencies, adopting this approach to developing your early career talent says a lot about you as an employer brand. Verizon takes its employer brand very seriously. We always want to make sure that we are providing good experiences to our candidates, valuable growth opportunities to our employees. And let me tell you, interns talk to each other, right? You are not accurate if you think that these interns are just applying to this job and they don't know what other positions their friends are applying to and they're not talking about their experiences with internships, right? They talk to each other. And so having an experience where you have this outside of the work context, outside of your role context, growth opportunity, where the organization's saying, you're our intern, you may not see us again after these 10 weeks, but we still want to send you back out into the world more prepared and better able to take on the challenges and obstacles and complications of working in the corporate environment than when you came to us. I think that speaks very highly of your employer brand, which from the organizational perspective is also something that we value.
Another benefit of that is also a good pathway to sponsorship. Once you're practicing these power skills and you're able to get the attention of decision makers around you, people will speak about you favorably when you're not in the room. And that's really what you want. And it takes practice, right? It's not only just, completing an assessment or having a discussion. It's really daily integration. It's like a muscle that has to be built over time.
And I think I would add, just in closing, Nisha, what you were saying a second ago about, right, getting like how you successfully got buy-in from those faculty members at the institution that you were at. I was thinking about, this past summer, NACE came to our Basking Ridge campus and we did pilot where we gathered some folks from the business together and they tried out the rubric. And what was really interesting to me about that, and I think that this is maybe helpful when you think about trying to implement something like this, either in a small scale or a broad scale at your company. I think if I had just emailed everyone and said like, hey, we're going to do an assessment, then people might not have been terribly excited about that. But when you can get people to understand the why and to see the human side of it and to get together and talk about it, to see how important it is and to create a space for them to talk about what this does for people, right? How it can be a genuine growth tool, then I think that makes the difference. When we got everyone together and we went through the vignettes and we practiced the assessment and people were coming to hand them in afterwards, I was just blown away by how many people wanted to just hang out and talk about how career competencies were just crucial you know, that your technical skills get you in the door, but they were really interested in how they could help other people to grow those career competencies. And so I think finding ways to sponsor those conversations and to just like let people talk about like why this is important, because I'm sure that it is important to them, but really creates an opening for getting past that, like, oh, like maybe I don't want to do an assessment.
Yeah, absolutely. I really felt it kind of goes back to when Heather mentioned her vague feedback. I felt like a lot of those folks, when they came up to talk about what they saw in the tool, was like, oh, yeah, I had a feeling about all those things, but this really spells it out, like what I would be expecting and how I could communicate it more clearly. So it just kind of demystifies a little bit the expectation that is kind of a gut feeling otherwise of overall growth or how interns are doing. And I wanted to say, as just a closing point, Tricia, when you said that it's a muscle that you build over time, this is very much what we're, I think, saying that we need to do, certainly in higher education, is to help student grow that muscle as they come into a potential contact with an employer or an experience, something like you're talking about, is practicing how do I kind of demonstrate my brand? How do I show that I have these skills? We're trying to get that to happen in the classroom, outside of the classroom, whether you're with, you know, in a club experience or you're in an internship, but also when you're just in a class doing a great project, how to show and talk about that skill development so that they start to get that real facility in like, and really be that kind of person that somebody wants to represent even when they're not in the room, like, oh, this person really does great work. This is what I really see them accomplishing. It is exactly that muscle that we're trying to build more in higher education so that they can really demonstrate it when they start to hit the places where they might connect to an employer partner or an internship experience. All right, I'll say that like we probably should close it there. It's been so great having this conversation. I have, you know, so many new thoughts and ideas coming out of all of your perspectives. And I just want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. Thanks everyone for joining us. And as we'll send out the slides and we'll make sure that this recording is available so that you could share it with other folks in your spheres. And we'll make sure you have contact information if you have any further questions. It's been a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye, folks. Thank you.